So we have finally reached the very last stage of video making, which is basically when we edit our video. In other words, when we put together all the clips that we made, all the visuals that we have prepared, and it's also the moment basically in which our video will progressively take the final shape. The first thing that I wanted to say is that video editing is a rather complex type of job. I'm not certainly an expert myself, but nonetheless I think that when it comes to video making, editing is as important as the shooting phase, the phase during which we actually make our clips. In this very last part, I'm going to walk through a number of issues that I think that are very important to be aware of when it comes to editing. Once again, I'm not an expert. I'm just sharing my own experience when it comes to editing videos, specifically educational videos. The type of application or piece of software that I suggest you to use is called DaVinci Resolve. This is basically a piece of software that you can download for free. There is also a paid version, but basically you can do everything you would like to do. Basically you can do all the very basic operations with the free version. It's not a trial version, which means that it's not that after a trial period you can no longer use it. It's just that certain I would say very advanced features are simply blocked unless you pay. Another thing that I would like to say about this specific tool is that it's not the easiest tool to use. There are plenty of others on the market. The reason why I'm using it, it's because it provides the very basic functions. It also allows you to understand and to get into all the little details of the editing process, which is actually very good. So, as you can see, I'm at home. This is my editing room. And essentially, the editing phase starts when you have done all the jobs. So, you have done all the shots, the clips are there, and you just have to put everything together. Before I switch to showing a few examples with DaVinci Resolve, I want to mention one important detail, which is about the relationship between shooting and editing. In other words, what is it that we do during the shooting phase and what it is that we do during the editing phase. I try to get all the shots done, all the clips done during the shooting phase. The reason is that when you start with the editing phase, you want to have everything in order. However, as I will show you, during the editing phase, you have the chance to enrich your shots. In other words, you can first of all make the shots look better, but also you may have a chance to add clips, videos that you may have found on YouTube, or you may just want to add pictures. So in that case, it happens that during the editing phase, you actually add some of the clips that will be later shown on the final version of your video. But this is pretty much up to you, and it's also depending on how much time you spend on scripting. Because if you have a detailed script, in other words, a detailed plan before you actually even start with the shooting phase, well, then basically the editing phase will just be putting all the pieces together. But as I said, sometimes I get a new idea, or I see that what I had in mind was not exactly what I wanted, so that I want to add or to find another option. And that's the moment in which I'm still looking for clips to add in the editing phase. But let's have a look now at this environment, which is called DaVinci Resolve. This is the environment that I'm using, and this is this very clip that you're watching. And basically, this is the environment. It's called DaVinci Resolve. The version that I have at the moment is the number 16.2. I think that it's the latest. I must also say that when it comes to editing, having a good laptop, a good computer is actually very important to render all these videos. So one big recommendation is that you don't use the old laptop that you used to have 5 years ago. It's actually better to have a good, powerful computer in order to do your editing. But so this is the kind of environment that DaVinci Resolve provides. Now, why is it that we may need to edit our video or our videos? Well, to me, the simplest answer is that when I actually make a video, I make mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes. And therefore, editing is a way to, let's say, clean up your video. This is the very basic things. So, for example, let me drag here. This is the timeline, the one that you see here. And these are all the clips that I was working on for this very video. But let's take now a new one. This is, you may have seen this already in the second part of this video. So this is the uncut version of the scene when I was describing the use of smartphone as a camera. So let's have a look at this. To video making nowadays. So this is basically the uncut version, and you can actually see that at the beginning I'm doing some sort of experiment. I'm trying out the position of me holding up the device. In this particular case, I just wanted to make sure that it was a good shot. So obviously in the final version you won't see this, because in the final version after the cut you just saw me. When it comes to video making nowadays, we are so obviously what I did was to cut the first part, because there was absolutely no point to do it. Now there are also cases in which I make mistakes, and this is quite common. And this is actually what I usually do during the editing phase. I just cut off those segments in which I made a mistake. I must say that, okay, I'm not an English native speaker, so sometimes I realized in post-production that during the editing phase, that I make a silly grammatical mistake, where what I do is to trust that my students will be patient with me. But of course, if while shooting I realize that the mistake was really bad, then I just start over again. But I don't stop recording. The camera keeps rolling, and it's all in post-production that I just cut off the part that I don't want. So let me see here if I have an example of one of my mistakes. First of all, it's very so okay. Yeah, so I found here a mistake to have. Let's see. First of all, it's very comfortable to have a device. Okay, let's watch it again. So I'm speaking to have a. First of all, it's very comfortable to have a device in your pocket. But you see that I start over again. And this is sometimes hard because I forget where I stopped at. But in this specific case, I think that the reason why I got distracted was that I had to scratch my eyes. So as you can see here, I was speaking. Let's see. First of all, it's indeed very comfortable to have a. And there you go, I made a mistake. So I just scratched my eyes, or I don't know, my cheek. And I decided to start over again, as you can see. So I stopped. First of all, it's very comfortable to have a device in your pocket. And I resumed. Sometimes, as I said, I forgot where I stopped at, and I just repeat the same sentence. This actually, it's a waste of time during the editing phase, because sometimes I think that, okay, I should cut here, but then I realized that when I did the second take, I started earlier. And therefore, you know that I have to go back and cut a larger portion of the video. Now, this is, of course, the very, I would say, the very basic purpose of editing. You want to clean up your video. But what happens with video editing is that, especially in DaVinci Resolve, as you can see here, you can have multiple tracks. In other words, this means that the video that I just showed you, this one, is just one of the many tracks that I can add to my timeline. So, for example, if you look at this video, you can actually see that this is the moment in which I used the green screen, and I'll be talking about how to edit when it comes to the edit with this green screen. But in this case, as you can see here, then I'm using 2 tracks. So the first one is me with the green screen. Now, since the green has been keyed out, you don't see it, so you have the black. But this is one track, and this is the second track. And the second track is basically a picture, which is the background in this case. So I can remove it temporarily. So this is me. This is me with the background, but I can also cut it off or to add it again. So this is to say that basically during the editing phase, or what I call also this means that during the editing phase, I can add several tracks at the same time, and they are basically overlapping. This is particularly helpful when you want to add, let's say, visuals. So in this case, the video wasn't particularly sophisticated, but I'm going to show you an example in which different videos were actually layered on top of one another. So, for example, this is actually quite a simple one. So I'm talking, as you can see here, but then something will happen. And let's see together. In this case, for example, I have the light coming from the front. I have 4 windows, and at the same time, I also have I can manipulate the lights that are coming from the ceiling. This is what you can actually see in this segment, is that I'm basically talking, and I'm using one of the clips that I had. And then at some point, what I did was, first of all, to add a background, which in this case it was red, and then I played a little bit with opacity. So you can make the background more or less opaque, so that it becomes more or less visible. It's just a design trick. And then on top of this, I overlaid basically 2 shots that I previously made. And these shots, as you could see from the video, were when I was describing the location of my video. And since I was describing the room in which I was making the video, then I decided to add videos, the actual videos showing the ceiling and the windows. So let's watch the video again. That is not dark. So in this case, for example, I have the light coming from the front. I have 4 windows. So I added a video that I had previously made in which I was showing the 4 windows. Actually, in this case, I made a small mistake because I couldn't show the 4th window, which is on the right. And at the same time, and then I added a second video that I made. Here there is actually a cut, as you can see. And the second video was showing the lights on the ceiling. Now, the reason why I decided to add these 2 additional clips, it was because this was basically helping you understand what I meant. Because the problem with video, not with video, but with verbal communication, is that we can describe things. So just like in this case, I was saying, well, you know, in my location, in my current location, I have the 4 windows in front of me, so the light is coming from the front, and then I have lights on the ceiling. I was verbally describing, but since this is a video and I have the chance to add clips, describing, actually literally showing what I was describing, then I found it obvious to add these 2 clips. Now in this case, as I said, the 2 additional clips are overlaid the other one. So as you can see here, me talking is still there. But what happens is that I put on top of the original video 2 additional layers. And for example, just to show you how DaVinci works, if I had done it this way, then everything would look basically red. Whereas I put it here because I just wanted to have it as a kind of background, and you can see here how it would look like. So you see. Now, just to show you that the clip is still here, for instance, I can remove this, and then you see that you will still have me there. 4 windows, and at the same time I also... Now, this is an important trick, because essentially this track, the track number 1, is basically the main track, is me talking. And for the entire duration of the video, you see that this is the same track. And once in a while, I add elements. This is another example. Let's play it. It's basically the same thing. To combine the video sources with an audio I think that I'm going to start talking about Manicam. And in this case, what I did was to record my screen where I was actually using Manicam. And I took the clip and I just overlaid on top of the usual red background and the main video that is still here and is still visible. Now, the red background is an element of design. And this is actually a very important thing to discuss, because I think that another important thing that editing allows you to do is to design your videos. In other words, how they're gonna look like, or even better, how you distribute the different clips on the main frame or within the main frame. So, as I said, just to summarize it very briefly, you usually do the editing to clean up your video. In case you want to add clips, this is another very important reason. And the other obvious reason why editing could be sometimes very helpful is because you want to design what you're going to show. In other words, what is going to happen within this frame. Now, in this case, you may say that the red background is a pure element of design. Is, let's say, to make it look a little bit nicer, perhaps? I don't know if you find it nicer. I actually find it nicer. So, but of course, it's not necessary. And for example, I could have, for example, removed this, remove the background. But as you can see here, there's something that doesn't really look nice, I would say. Because, okay, this is basically just overlapping, just 2 videos overlapping, one on top of the other. And it might be also confusing. Well, in other words, there are aesthetical reasons or design reasons not to have this type of design. So, in this case, I added the red background, and it's basically like an image that you can drag and drop, as you can see, because I felt that I wanted to hide the background, which is this one, but at the same time I still wanted you to see that there is something there. And that's why I decided to put this red background. As I said, this is an element of design, and this is of course not this is certainly not something that I would recommend you to do in all videos. It's pretty much up to you. Another option, and just to tell you, just to show you how designing how your video looks like is part of the editing process, and it's also a very important part of video making, is this. This is another example. So let's say that I would like to have still me in the background, so let's change it. So the idea here is that I want to show you ManyCam. This is basically my objective. So I wouldn't just have me talking about ManyCam, but I want to show it. I want to show the application so that you get a better impression of what I'm talking about. Well, so in this case, and this is basically editing at its purest, the first thing that I could do is, for example, resize the window in which I'm showing ManyCam. I can also decide, well, that this is not so important. Sorry. The background is not so important. I can delete it. And for example, well, I could perhaps show myself. I can put myself a little bit smaller and then show you something like this. Could this be a nice design? I don't really think so. So let's go back to what I was doing, how it was before. Okay, but let's make another simple example. Let's say that I want to have this video, full screen. So the first thing that I have to do is to enlarge it so that all the elements that I'm going to talk about in the video are still visible. In this case is the audio source and the video source. And then what I have to do is to show this video here. And what I have to do is basically to bring it forward and to resize it. And in this case, you see that I can have myself in the right bottom corner. In this case, as you can see, I don't actually need to have the red background. Of course, I had other examples that are pretty interesting, which is usually what we do in post-production, one of which is the green screen. Perhaps I can show you this. Okay, when it comes to the green screen, you have to imagine that the clip with the green screen needs to be properly manipulated. Now, this is not a video that tells you how to edit. It's just supposed to show you a few details that you can start playing with. But essentially, when you have the green screen, you have to, technically speaking, it's called to key out the green. This is something that needs a little bit of expertise. It needs you basically need to know how to do it in DaVinci Resolve. I will actually post some specific videos that can help you in case you have a green screen or in case you want to learn that. But essentially, this is the original video, as you can see. And all you have to do is to key out this part to remove the green. For doing that, there is a certain procedure. As I said, this is beyond the purpose of this video. But this is something that is done during the editing phase, of course. But what I wanted to show you is how we can actually play with the green screen, because the advantage, as I said before, is that once we have the green screen, we are a little bit more free to play, in this case with me, with the image of me, with the footage of me talking. So I can resize myself, I can make myself very small so that I can put myself on the TV set. I think that this is an example that I made. Or, on the contrary, I can make myself very big. Now, this is particularly helpful when it comes to designing our videos, because, of course, if I just want to show myself, then this will be the design of this particular scene. But if I want to show something, and I think that this is something that is coming, then, like for instance in this case, I'm here, but all I can do is just to still show myself, because I can bring myself forward. I resize myself. I can actually then put myself into the right bottom corner, and what we have is this nice effect that there is a clip played and I appear as well. And when it's over, I can actually I can make myself bigger again. And as I said, this is something that we usually do in post-production or during the editing phase. Of course, there are plenty of other things that we can do, and maybe I can make an additional example. So as I was saying before, we have to take care of the overall design of our scenes. And well, another option, just to show you, without the green screen, in case, for example, I want to be present while I'm showing some visuals. For example, a case in which I'm talking about a list of things and I want them to appear. One example could be this. For instance, I can actually see I can reduce the image of myself. I can then put a background. This is going to be on the back, so you see. Let's say that this would be perfect. And then, again, in post-production, one of the things that you can do with the DaVinci Resolve, but virtually with all other editing pieces of software, is that you can add titles. And you do it this way. So this is a title. You drag and drop it on the timeline. This is the timeline. You decide where to position the title. It seems there's something wrong. I was actually cropping it. So, okay, I move it here. Let's say that I want to change the font. I would like to have Windsor. And let's say that I say I'm talking about video editing, so video editing. So this would be appearing here. I can also add video transitions, and I will explain to you what this means. So basically the effect is something like this. And if I want to add a new title, what I do is that I copy this element. If I want both titles to be on the screen at the same time, then of course I have to move it here on the timeline. And then the effect is something, and then of course I also have to move it to another position. So let's say that this is the first item in our list, in our bullet list, as I call it. First element, and then this is the second element. Say that it should be a little bit smaller. It should be smaller as well, so it was 111, so that's just to get the same size. And here you go. Imagine that I'm talking about several things. So first element, second element, and so on and so forth. Now this is a very simple example. And this is also a particular type of design. For example, to make yet another case, I could actually see myself. I can display myself full screen. So I go back to the cropping function and I move myself. Another optional can make it myself a little bit bigger. Now here in this case, what I have to do is to play a little bit with this one, with the background. And since I have to show it on top of me talking, then I should move it forward. Okay, but in this case, you see, I disappeared. Well, but I can do the same because I can crop the background, so I can do this, and then I can play a little bit with the opacity of this background. And there you have another element of design. Let's play it. So let's say that I'm talking about the first, the second thing. So the first, then the second comes in, and this is it. Probably in this case I should move the image with myself a little bit here. But then you see there will be this, which is not nice. Well, one option is that I just resize this and move it here. And I can do the same with the other, making sure that it's the same font size. It's 103. Okay, this is a little bit longer, but well, as you can see, this is not actually so bad. Perhaps I can reduce opacity. I don't think that it's so bad, isn't it? Okay, I could actually continue talking about how to edit and design the way in which your video is going to look like, but maybe we can stop here. Perhaps the very last thing that I would like to add is that if you have been wondering, yes, it's very time consuming. I think that if shooting a video may take not so much time, especially if you don't make too many mistakes, I would say that when it comes to video editing, most of the time goes into it. So to make an example, if you have a 40-minute video, shooting it may take you roughly an hour or so, because you may make mistakes, you may retake the same scene several times. So let's say that you usually have a little bit of buffer. So let's say 40 minutes means that shooting lasts for 1 hour. Plus, of course, arranging the setting and the location of your video. This also may take some time. But for a video, for a 40-minute video, which involves heavy editing, meaning that you add visuals, you have titles, you decide to add titles just like I just showed you, then it may take you a couple of days, I would say, of hard work. So it's a very time-consuming job. But as I explained in the first part of this video, the advantage is that I think you have very good teaching and learning materials, because you combine, as I said in the first part of this video, verbal descriptions with video descriptions, with visual descriptions, and I think that this is absolutely priceless for conveying either concepts or topics that are at the center of our teaching. So basically the final message is try to get started with video making. You will have big issues, of course. You will make mistakes. You will have to retake the same scene perhaps several times. You may also get into a very bad mood because you may see that things are not moving on. But I must say that overall it's worth the time spent. And last but not least, editing is also something that might elicit the artistic soul within yourself, because as you can see, it's somehow comparable to making a PowerPoint presentation, because you have to deal with many design elements. But I would say that video editing even goes beyond that, especially because usually in PowerPoint you have more, we basically create visuals. We don't have, for example, our talking head, and let's say that a PowerPoint presentation, unless you're recording it, unless you're doing the screencasting, PowerPoint presentation is supposed to be shown in a live event. So basically, this is it with editing, and this was also the last part of this video. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.